The sun was hidden behind some clouds, but I went over to the Susquehanna River. The Susquehanna River in Colombia is broad, it goes way across. The Susquehanna River is half the water into the Chesapeake Bay. Just, that's how big it is. Half the water into the Chesapeake Bay is the Susquehanna River. It was freezing overnight. So at the edge of the river, there were some bigger chunks of ice submerged along the edge that looked like they had maybe floated downstream from somewhere where it was smaller and it had a chance to freeze because it's a little wider and it doesn't every decade or two the Susquehanna River actually freezes all the way across from one side to the other, but there's a lot of water, there's a lot of flow, it doesn't freeze all the way across. And about 20 feet out from shore, the water was flowing with little bits of stuff in it. And near the edge, it was ice. And I stood there, and the first thing I did was listen because the sun was shining and it was just above freezing, and there were some chunks of ice next to each other buried down, but there was a sheet of ice over top of it. It was very thin, thinner than a dinner plate, thicker than a sheet of paper, thinner than a dinner plate. The chunks of ice were almost exactly the size of a bread box. So the chunks of ice were the size of a bread box. The sheet of ice on top was thicker than a sheet of paper and thinner than a dinner plate. And it was tinkling. It was tinkling because the sun was shining and the ice was melting. And then I saw there were some little bubbles of air underneath, and they weren't staying still. They weren't moving quickly, but they weren't staying still. Like there must have been some pressure waves coming in from the open water where there was just a slow slow back and forth ebb and flow, push and pull of these little air, and then I noticed right at the very edge there was a little shelf of the ice that was almost paper thin at this point, and then an inch lower is where it had actually dropped, and there was the rest of the sheet of ice because the river water level must have gone down an inch since it froze. Like a little shelf and then a drop. And over here, I could see that instead of having the drop, the whole sheet of ice across the top for about 5 feet was just slanting slowly down. And that's what was tinkling because it was getting, and then a piece of ice the size of 3 or 4 dinner plates went all at once. And the light changed because it's all glistening and reflecting, and every little piece and it's still shiny and the sound like all of those different phonemes that the ice can make when it's tinkling and crackling and falling. So it's the whole language of ice melting into the river. The bigger chunks the size of bread box and the little dinner plate and the sheet sized places and whoosh. And I think because I've been taking 10 minutes every morning counting my breaths, I was able to stand there and listen to the language of the ice and see the glistening of the water and the ice and the sun. And do that I looked at my clock just when I got there, and then I looked at my clock when I was walking away. I did that for 14 minutes. And I think I could do that for 14 minutes listening to the language of the river. because I've been counting my breaths in the morning.